Good evening, Nick Griffin, Jim Saleam. Welcome to the chat. Right, well, I do believe we've got a lot to ask Nick, and I want to start off by asking you about the protests in the UK and Ireland. Are they early steps to a more assertive people now recognising their British identity? If so, is it an encouraging beginning of a move towards something more arduous?
So I assume, Nathan, you're speaking about the protests against the immigration hostels, yes?
The migrant hotels and the
migrant hotels.
Immigration. Yeah.
They've in Britain, in the UK at present, they've calmed down actually just a little bit. I think partly to do with the weather and so on. It's getting colder at this time of year, so it's not quite as dramatic as it was a few weeks ago. But it's all bubbling there. Yeah, it's a very important thing. It's part of something actually much bigger. It's intimately connected with the Flagsters protest, the Raise the Colours operation, which has turned vast amounts of England, parts of Wales and Scotland into something that looks more like Northern Ireland used to look, just a few years ago. There's flags, even in my village. I live in a little village in the country. Even here, it looks like a Northern Ireland village. There's Union Jack flags and St George crosses all over the place. In Scotland, there's saltires. And in every case, basically, you've got ordinary people reclaiming their flags, especially in Scotland and Wales. The flags are being reclaimed right now from the fake Marxist separatists and taken back for ordinary people proud of their own country, just as in England. So the protests against the asylum centres in specific places are a sort of a crystallised and extra powerful form of this general feeling that's a sort of tribalism. In fact, one of my very best old BNP colleagues I was speaking to a couple of weeks ago, and he's based in the West Midlands, and he said that just over the last few months, he described it as a re-tribalisation of people there. He said it's on a staggering scale in terms of its breadth and its depth. So it's going on. Where does it lead? Just protests against the asylum hotels. If they lead anywhere directly, it'll be the government giving up on asylum hotels and instead moving these people either into what they call houses of multiple occupation, i.e. an ordinary house which has been split into little flats and there's 3 or 4 asylum seekers living in it, or potentially into Army and RAF barracks. So there'll be a little bit of change of where these people go. Other than that, won't change anything. What it all does show is the potential for much more drastic unrest, and also it's feeding into and reflecting the immense political changes going on with Nigel Farage's fake patriot reform operation, looking like it's going to sweep the old parties of government almost out of Westminster. These really are remarkable times in Britain.
Well, I will take the essence of the British identity there. We'll take it to the general radical activist movement, and I'll hand it over to Jim to ask you a specific question related to that.
Yes, so I've got a couple of questions for you. I know Nathan's got some stuff on your Substack articles, and you're making it very, very plain in what you're writing that there is no parliamentary road. I can tell you that I'm authoring an article this week, the Pauline Hanson One Nation phenomenon in Australia. They're now quoting it on 15% of the vote. And our party system, we have a Liberal Party and a so-called National Party, and they've been in coalition for decades upon decades. In the 50s and 60s, there was an adjunct. It was called the Democratic Labor Party. It was a Catholic party that split away from the Labor Party, and they buttressed up the anti-communist Conservatives. We're now witnessing the possibility of a 3-way coalition in Australia between the 2 traditional Conservative parties and One Nation. And a lot of people, you know, they're very enthused about this and all this. And I've read what you've been saying, that Farage is no solution, but you push it along. And I was considering using the cheeky phrase that I would support a vote for one nation in the same way a rope supports a hanging man. And it may well be that, an old saying, it may well be that this nonsense of a three-way coalition will open up enormous political potential. If, as you say, there is no parliamentary road, then what are you actually saying you want the Faragists to do?
I think the several different roles historically of these populist parties. One is simply to break up the old two-party fig leaf sham that we've had, and even though they are themselves largely fake, certainly at the top, just getting people to vote for something different, to break the old habits, is something really, really important. So if the populists only did that, historically it'd be a valuable thing. More than that, though, I think they'll tend to disrupt the entire system, and especially because the sheer scale of the growth, certainly of reform, I don't know about over with you in Australia, but the sheer scale of this, I mean, they're going from basically no councillors to they've now got 1,000 local government councillors. Over the next 2 or 3 years, that could easily go up to 4,000. In parliamentary terms, they're going to be going from no MPs a couple of years ago to potentially 400 out of 650. Now, a few of those MPs, of course, will be recycled Conservatives and particular cronies of Farage's. Most of them will actually be ordinary people who haven't been involved in politics at all. And we're seeing this certainly all over Europe in the populist parties, that they're growing so fast, they're bringing so many people in that they're involving people who haven't got a political past and therefore automatically don't have any ideological structure in their heads. And these parties can't develop an ideology because part of their appeal as populists is to be all things to all men. So if they develop a policy which is, or an ideology based strongly on normal capitalism, which is where a lot of them come from, of course, that's going to upset, especially the free trade deregulation stuff, that's going to upset their working class vote. If, on the other hand, they develop a Labour style, old Labour, British nationalism or whatever, then that upsets their Conservatives. So therefore, they've got to stay basically non-ideological. So I think what they do most of all is bring a huge number of people into a pond in which it's our job to go fishing. That's the key thing. So we don't know what's going to come out of it. What we do know is Nigel Farage is, he's about 60. We're in an age of political assassinations now. He could easily be dead tomorrow, or he'll be out of politics in 12 years' time. And then there'll be something new. And what's particularly interesting is that I gather, certainly in other parts of Europe as well as in Britain, there's increasing numbers of young men, very young men, getting involved in these parties. And especially with AI, you've got now a whole generation of university educated youngsters for whom in 3 or 4 years' time, there are going to be no jobs, no white collar jobs at the level that they can get into. So a surplus elite like that has to go somewhere, and some of them will go into politics. There's going to be a lot of them, in fact, are Muslims. So they're going to go into politics on the left or in the old conservative parties, or into radical Islam. But where do the surplus elite, these young British graduates with no jobs to go to, where do they go? I think a lot of them will go into politics, which means that the old guard, the sort of the old foolish reactionaries who we know and loathe all too well in these populist parties, they will be ousted in a few years' time by young men, and young men especially have a craving for ideology and order. And if you're going to have some kind of age-based coup from young populists against the old ones, then the best pole around which that age-based thing can revolve is actually an ideological faction to take control of these populists. So I think that just the fact they're opening this up, and then these young people coming through who potentially will have a revolutionary attitude. Now, whose revolution it is, whether they're taken down a line approved by the CIA, we'll probably talk about fake nationalism in due course later on in the show, or whether they become proper nationalists, I think that's largely up to us. If we get to work on these people, instead of just writing them off as they're all fake, you know, which undoubtedly at the top it is, this thing is, but people at the bottom are not. If we write them off as all fake, and if we simply sit and grumble, they're taking our votes, so we hate them, or occasionally, even worse, we stand in their way and get a pathetic vote, just enough to let a socialist in instead of them, then all we get from these people is hostility. Our hostility to them will be repaid, naturally. If instead of that we look rather more in the way that the Socialist Workers' Party in Britain, Trotskyite monsters, they always used to say, come elections, hold your nose and vote Labour. You know, vote Labour with no illusions. So similarly in this case, I'm telling our people, you know, vote Reform with no illusions, support Reform with no illusions, but not because we want them to win because we think they're going to do anything. We want them to win because they think they will open up a time pregnant with possibilities for genuine nationalism.
Yes, I concur with your view, yes, very much.
Now, I was actually referring when I introduced you, Jim, to your particular question about the ASOVification.
Oh, yes. Yeah.
Everything we discussed tonight is going to pretty much eddy around, and at one point will meet another. So it's not a disruptive question to introduce at this juncture.
Well, why not? Look, probably like yourself, Nick, I've reached a conclusion. There is such a thing as fake nationalism, and it's being very energetically promoted. And in some quarters, that term Azov is being used. That this is a fake construct arising from the unique circumstances of Ukraine, but it can be paralleled in various ways in other countries. From your point of view, how would you best define this Azovism, taking it out of its Ukraine context, maybe making it more universal? What does it do? How does it act?
Well, obviously, it's a huge question. It's a question, I suppose, of where to start. So first of all, the big picture, I think that this thing basically is a CIA operation. This is the American deep state and its adjuncts in the Five Eyes I think that they probably, well, you can go back past Azov and what they've done in Ukraine to Gladio, where in the old Cold War times, there was this effort to create this secret army of extreme right-wing cells who would stay behind in the event of, say, the Soviet takeover of Italy, which was on the cards at one stage. But we even had these stay behind Gladio type things bubbling along in Britain as well, which people find amazing. There was a time back in the early mid 70s when everybody in politics in Britain actually believed that Britain was going to go through a process of Finlandization and end up basically as a Soviet satellite. So the fear there was real, at least at one level. If you go higher up and think that, well, the Soviet Union was bankrolled with the same people, etc., it's not the same. But at the level of perhaps Cold War operatives, there was a real communist risk. So Gladio was created. And in order to get people, I suppose, who were crazy enough and extreme enough to be malleable, they went really to the ultra far right. Really some really extreme and crazed actual proper fascists, not ordinary hardcore right-wing nationalist fascists, real crazy fascists. So they went for them. Now, I think then when the Cold War ended, that seemed to fade away. It wasn't needed anymore. And then at some point around about 2012, 2014, they obviously found the serious powers in the West in general, and the United States in particular, found that, or concluded that the extreme right in Ukraine, as you said, for specific reasons, was a wonderful weapon, a thing to weaponize. So again, you can come out to the big picture, and there's a direct parallel here between the way in which the same people radicalized and weaponized fundamentalist Islam, really their enemy, but nevertheless very, very useful. First of all, in Afghanistan against the Soviets, and then more recently in places like Libya, Syria, so on. So they radicalized and created this Wahhabi monster, or weaponized Wahhabi monster. And at some point, 2012, 2014, they decided to do exactly the same thing with neo-fascism in Ukraine, which they did very successfully. With the whole Maidan thing, the whole Maidan coup was based on 5,000 or 6,000 hardcore ultra-nationalists. They provided the physical force, the boot boys of this operation to create a Slavic Brothers war on behalf of the American deep state. And I think having seen the success of that, they're rolling it out right the way across not just the whole of the Anglosphere, but the whole of the Western world. Every single place that I've looked, and I've spoken to colleagues, people I've known a long, long time, all over Europe, they say the same thing is happening, that there's this, what appears to be organic, just springing up on places like Telegram, of a new form of fundamentally non-ideological nationalism, which is based on the love of violence, mayhem and murder for their own sake. There's a very, very heavy Satanist subtext to it. And you scratch the surface and you find the people who are posing as normal European nationalists are pro-Azov, anti-Ukraine, and therefore happy to be in bed with Zionists, homosexuals, the whole global homo thing. It is so unnatural and abnormal that it cannot be organic. And when you start looking and you see, who are these people following, then, well, when you get people like Joshua Caleb Sutter, who's one of the main ideological promoters through Martinet Press of this stateless Nazism, when you then find that he's been a paid CIA informant for 20 years, sorry, FBI informant, and you see this pattern time and time again. They're either informants for one of the state agencies, or they're Satanists, but they're not normal nationalists, although this is an attempt to take over, suborn and own normal nationalism. It's a staggering scale, actually. I don't know how far they'll go, but even if there's a sufficient pushback from genuine nationalists, this doesn't go very far. They've already got significant numbers of cells of young, crazed and ultra radicalized young men who in due course will be the same kind of terrorists as we've seen have come out of the Wahhabi ISIS operation created by the same people.
Now, on that topic, I mentioned a while ago in one of our chats, I identified a connection between certain actors in Australia who are characterised like you have just described, these quasi-Azophites, and I see that they're spawning replicants in England. And we have unsuccessfully been predicting their proscription for a number of years now, but it seems that just at the time they look like they can't go any further. Out of nowhere comes this great resurrection. Well, right at the moment they're at their peak, and they pulled a stunt, I believe last Saturday, outside of a state parliament where we are, New South Wales state parliament, and this has progressed discussion of proscribing them, or it's raised it in the usual mouthpieces for the system. Jim knows exactly who I'm talking about, and having been in an organisation where he watched that pattern, that template, we see it again. Now, given that we're seeing them wearing even the identical costumes of the National Socialist Network. I have forgotten that group. You identified them for me. I highlighted in a video.
Yeah, this was the White Vanguard.
Yes,
Is one of them, and then we've also got the active clubs. They're all very much interlinked.
Yes, and that's the thing. Now, what happens if in this country they prescribe, they say, they take it where they want to, they prescribe it. And I see if they do that, it is because we are seeing similar grassroots stirring against accelerated immigration in this country under this particular government. And there has been record street protests against it. And these have already been corrupted by this National Socialist Network. So if they prescribe them, is that a means of invalidating the kind of rhetoric and expression that could be used around arguments of native identity? And what impact would that have in England?
Well, I'll give you a specifically British connection to this. And you say, you've been confidently prescribing that people would get, predicting that people would get prescribed, for some years. I've done the same, actually. I said now 5-6 years ago that following the prescription of national action, that patriotic alternative would in due course be prescribed. And it's very, very close to, the people you're talking about in Australia as well. And thus far it hasn't been. And I've been a little bit surprised by that. But so it's not absolutely clear what's going on. I think there might be several agendas. I think that the sort of lower level, especially the socialist types in the Labour Party and their campaigners. So there's a lower level within the state which would very happily prescribe these people yesterday. And then there's a higher level which doesn't want to prescribe them yet, because it's the old thing that came out of the troubles in Northern Ireland, when the British state stamped all over and prescribed people who were sympathetic to the IRA, but did nothing to the people who were sympathetic to the loyalist paramilitaries. And this radicalized the Catholic population towards the IRA. And one of the things they took from that is if you're going to crack down on one side, you have to crack down on the other side in order to show you're balanced. And given that there's no realistic equivalence between the threat, or hasn't been, between the threat of radical Islam in Britain as a terrorist detonator and of the far right, then you have to create a perceived threat on the far right so that you can ban the two and look even-handed. So on that analysis, they wouldn't ban them yet. They're there for a purpose. But I also think that the previous comments or question about ASOVification, that there's sections, especially from higher up and the American deep state, I don't think they want to prescribe these people at all. They've got a role for them.
Yes.
And therefore they'll keep them going. So the benefit for prescription for the lower down levels of all of this, and Jim, you sort of touched on this in your extended question there, I think, is that if PA was prescribed tomorrow, then given that at one stage Mark Collett, at the very least, had put a known state asset list leaker in charge of their administration, then you have to assume that the contact details, the addresses, the identity of every single person who's passed through PA is known to the powers that be. That's probably now 20,000 people, I guess. Yeah, they haven't been paid up dues card carrying members, but they passed through its online system. So they're known. All of them are known. This gives the British state the power, not just now, but at any stage in the next 20 years, to go to any one of those 20,000 people, a very large number of whom, because of the way that the demographics of nationalist ideas have changed, a very large number of whom are basically middle-class young men who you would expect to be going into some sort of profession or government administration or something like that. The British state has thousands upon thousands of them. It can go to any stage and say, if we expose you who you are, in fact, you used to be involved with PA, your career's finished, your life's over. So you play ball. So you do what we say. So they've created a vast pool of assets. They've also created the ability to pollute the water in which the fish swim anytime they want. That any of these protests, and especially if they get bigger and more militant, any of the protests against mass immigration and the asylum thing and so on, will have people attending them, people involved in them. And certainly if they were going to become anything, it would need some of the current generation of, you know, young and up and coming nationalists to get involved. And because they're all tarred, or 20,000 of them are tarred with that brush, every single organization that arises later can be described, if they want, as a continuity organization of this now banned prescribed PA, and therefore they can be crushed as well. So it gives the British state an enormous in to a distinctly radical and for them troublesome popular rising against the late stage of this mass immigration madness, and they can pop that balloon at any time they want, thanks to this thing that they've created and worked on.
Well, I'm sorry, Jim, I will let you go in a moment, but I'll let you go now. No, that's
Make your minds up.
I believe our two countries are similarly reflective of each other. And when you were differentiating the English far right, as you wish to take that sobriquet, as apart from Islamic terrorism in this country, our Director General of the Australian Security Intelligence Organisation, ASIO, he's conflating the two together, and he's doing it over criticism of Jews and Israel. And this is an interesting thing because it seems the useful part and the bits they're prescribing now, while the ASIO won't speak directly to suggestions, as one New South Wales MP made about prescribing NSN, and they're very topical at the moment. They are talking about laws, right? Laws which would limit the ability effectively to offend the Jewish people. And one of them is they're going to vote on a ban of the chant blood and honour, right? Now, we spoke about poisoning the water there, but now we can see that there's also another factor involved, and that is criticism of Israel. And that is a tinderbox in the UK, I do believe, particularly given that the more extreme elements of the far right, which might be a little bit more scattered at the moment, and the Islamists do unite on that, as do a lot of radical leftist elements. Could that be whereabouts this thing comes into play? And you can answer that too, Jim, afterward.
Yeah, certainly the same thing is going on over here. I'm not sure it's exactly part of the same development, though. Not least because, well, firstly, we're seeing it's clearly a worldwide operation. It's very, very strong in Britain at the moment. This deliberate effort by the very organised political Judaists, particularly the Border Deputies of British Jews and the Campaign Against Anti-Semitism, which is basically it's not even, it's from the board to one degree, but it's funded and incited by the Netanyahu regime. And actually the Border Deputies is a rather more left-wing Jewish operation. It's not the same thing. But in this case, they're urinating in the same pot. And their effort isn't to prevent criticism of Jewish people. Their effort is deliberately to conflate criticism of Zionism and the murderous activities of the IDF and the State of Israel with anti-Semitism and criticism of Jews, and thereby to take the inculcated horror that there is against criticism of Jews, because we all know where it leads, and use that to prevent any criticism at all of the State of Israel and its genocidal methods. and aims. So that's certainly going on. Is this really about these ultra far rights, the active clubs and so on? I don't think so, because they say very little about this. Their main hatred actually is directed against boomers and against Muslims, or against all ethnic minorities. And yes, they're the standard far right anti-Jewish stuff, they're Hitlerite and so on, but they don't exactly measure on it, and they have no interest and have never once suggested that I've ever seen any sort of alliance or common ground between white nationalism and the Muslims. That doesn't come. If anyone's in the frame for that, it's me.
Yes.
Rishi Sunak stood on the steps at number 10 Downing Street and specifically said that it's a name me personally, and then said it's really worrying that the far right and radical Muslims, this was particularly a reference to the Five Pillars podcasting operation, which I did a long interview with, that they're coming together and they're working together to criticize Israel. So it's a rather different thing. Now, certainly anything that they want to do to demonize and squish on the far right, then they can bring these very, very angry young men into the equation and throw them into the propaganda mix. But that doesn't necessarily mean it's part of the same thing. As I say, to reiterate on this, that the people saying, look, actually, strangely enough, there are some common ground between these people and us, and it's surely better that we talk about it than we rush to fight each other. That's not coming from them. It's coming from an older, wiser and more nuanced nationalism, of which I'm only part. There's plenty of others thinking the same thing.
I didn't mean to imply that was it. I just meant that both of these people, both of these groups focus on Jewry.
Yes, yeah.
But Jim, I wanted
to... I'm going to just say there, just to sort of clarify, because it's a hugely sort of complicated thing. The Islamists don't focus on Jewry. They focus on Zionism, and actually, to quite a degree, I think they're waking up to it. They're almost blind to the fact that there's something much older, deeper, and darker than Zionism, and that Zionism is a reflection of the deep racism there is in the Talmud. And they haven't seen that. So that's not the same as the informed white nationalist position at all, nor is it the same as the crazies, the ultras that we've been talking about, who've just got a hatred of Jews as Jews, and their position on say Israel is at best, well, it's both sides are scum. We're not interested in either side. We have no interest at all in the idea of justice in the third world, which is a thoroughly perverse position, actually, when you think about it, because the injustice of the American hegemony, NATO and Zionism smashing up huge chunks of the third world, currently now additionally Gaza and the West Bank, is a direct and the prime feeder of immigration into the West. Yes. So you cannot deal, in the end, you cannot deal with the problem of Islamization of the West, of mass immigration, and of our becoming a minority in our homelands, without dealing with the problem of Western imperialism and Zionism smashing up the countries so that those people have come here and cannot go home. And in the end, the only way we're going to get rid of them one day, because we can't get rid of them physically, there's far too many of them, our population is too old, it'd be a disastrous civil war we probably wouldn't even win. Even if we did, it would be a heap of rubble. The only realistic way we're going to get rid of those people one day is that it suits them to go back to their homelands, and the homelands are livable. It's an entire possibility, but not while the American hegemony and Zionism are smashing up their countries. So we have to stop that. Therefore, there has to be a connection at some point, in some way, between genuine nationalists in the Anglosphere and the white world, and the Muslims and for that matter, the African nationalists of Africa and so on. We have some way or other to deal with these people in a multipolar world. And the crazies' position is nothing like that at all. It's that they are all Untermensch. We are simply going to kill them all. You know, it's not just hate-filled nonsense. It's an impossibility. So no, there's not that much of a correlation between this form of extremism on the far right and the Islamists. They're not like that.
Well, we never said they were. Asia said they were.
It's very interesting because some sources, Nick, in the Australian scene, you can be called a third worldist. It's become a cult thing. You can be called a third worldist for what you just said. There's one very prominent person in Australia here running this, or involved in this ratty scene, who actually came out with material cursing Israel on the one hand and the Palestinians on the other, and pretending he's equal-handed and all the rest of it. But what he really means is exactly what you said. You know, like to press a magic button and they all simply disappear. It's quite disturbing. I'd also say to you that some of these structures, that they're not necessarily all designed for a long life. I'd put to you that some of them might have a life for a year, 2 years, 3 years, then the establishment sinks them to the bottom of the ocean. And if someone like yourself or me comes along and goes, hang on, they go, you're crazy, where's the ship? I don't see any ship. You must be delusional. So a lot of these structures have very, very short lives. For example, you mentioned before the active clubs. Now, you know, I remember a few years ago there was a sports club in Australia and it could have done a lot of good, actually. There's nothing wrong with it. I know from what I've heard some European nationalists do support some of these establishments in a limited sort of way to bring young blokes together and train them up, and there's nothing wrong with that. But you mentioned before active clubs, and there was an American fellow called Rundo, or was it Rando? I keep getting confused with Rambo, you know. But he was deported from Romania to the United States to answer charges. He was one of the founders of the active clubs. And voila, he virtually walked out of court. Well, he didn't quite, but he almost walked out of court absolutely free, this bloke. Sort of shadow of the famous Charlie Sargent over there in Britain, who I understand got the comfort letter handed up to the judge, as I understand the mythology goes. This bloke virtually got off his alleged crimes. There's an English sexologist, I understand, called Tate, who's supposed to be somewhat famous. He was mentioned in the Australian press recently. And there's one of his offsiders is now going
That's
to...
Andrew Tate.
That's Andrew Tate, yeah.
Yes.
And, yeah,
very much less English than either of you, for a start.
Oh, well, thank you. I have some English ancestry. I hope we're not related, Nick, but nonetheless. But the fact of the matter is, he has an offsider in Australia who has now come to teach young men in certain groups how to meet girls. I've read an interesting article of yours recently, and I'm quite sure this bloke's model is not correct.
Can I just say, Jim, you forgot the good bit. He's an ex-porn star.
Ah, that's right. Yes, he's an ex-porn star. Great stuff. But it seems to me that a lot of the equating in Australia between so-called extremists of the right and extreme Muslims, as you pointed out, they're very different. And there's a definite attempt in Australia to ban a group called Hizb ut-Tahrir or something. It's quite active. It is an Islamist group, but it recruits a lot of young men. And they're trained in a certain way. They're somewhat disciplined, and they've made a nuisance of themselves to the establishment on various occasions. So each time the media operates extremists from the right, they always drop these fellows in, and they're talking about, the Jewish lobby's talking about banning them. They should be banned as Muslim extremists and so on. It's very clear to me that the establishment, what you say, they play both sides. They pretend activities at even-handedness, and all the time they're attempting to crush genuine debate about Israel, about Palestine, that their issue is simply to criminalise or stigmatise anti-Zionism and the issues of imperialism that lie behind it. And I think I'd make the general submission. You can't really be a modern nationalist if you don't recognise that these things that were done in Palestine were crimes. I often say to people, you don't have to be running around with Palestine flags or pretending like that lunatic in England there, David Myatt, the father of Satanism over there. You don't need to be doing that to prove that you're aware of these issues. But what was done in Palestine was a crime. There's a lot of Christian people waking up to it now too. They can't condone what the Zionists do. A lot of those fundamentalists who go to certain churches here in Australia, we get feedback, these people are waking up. And it's almost become a not in our name, not in the name of Christ. Can you do this? And there's a lot of, I can understand the Director General of ASIO here is being driven mad by 1,000 pinpricks and developments all at once. So there's a lot. Obviously, I'll turn the discussion back to you, but I think that your line on this is right on.
Yeah, thank you. So I'll come back to the active clubs in a moment. But first of all, as an aside on Andrew Tate, you know, and he is saying, you know, teaching, you know, young men how to get on with girls. Unfortunately, that's not the true. There certainly is. There's definitely a role for older advisors for young men on how to find the right woman and how to live and all the rest of it. And the age war that's being, or the ageism which is being encouraged by this new breed of different sort of fake nationalist is, of course, it helps to block that. But Tate wasn't teaching young men how to get on with girls in the way that we would think, in a constructive way. He's teaching young men how to pimp girls, how to turn them in, how to turn them into money centers, how to turn them into whores working for them. That's it. So
that sounds like a grooming gang, Nick.
It is indeed a grooming gang. It is absolutely so. You know, what is he? Well, he's some kind of ethnic mix. He said his father's supposed to be a chess champion, which would suggest to me that his father wasn't African, or at least not all African, shall we say?
Isn't he Romanian?
Something else going on there. His main actual the power behind the throne in the Tate Empire is a man by the name of Iggy Semmelweis. You know, we're not actually dealing again with something organic. This thing is another fake, deliberately designed to lead young men astray. Now, the fact that young men are very angry with feminism and the way in which, especially young white men, have been, you know, demonized and cast aside is absolutely natural, normal, and healthy. You know, they're entitled to feel angry. But the Tate stuff isn't a reaction. It's not a healthy reaction to feminism. It's the flip side of the same coin, the same disruptive coin. So, you know, we've had in the old days, nationalists would rightly rail against the class war dividing the nation. Well, this divides the nation on a different line. So now we're divided also between male and female, especially, you know, young, as well as between older and younger. So it's new forms of division for the same old ends. Very, very unhealthy. Coming on with the active clubs themselves, there's no doubt in my mind the vast majority of the youngsters involved in it, even at the local organisational level, are thoroughly good. Yes. You know, again, they're reacting against something which is monstrous, and it's a response of fear. They think, yeah, our streets are no longer safe. There's civil war coming, so we're told. You know, you can see, yes, it may well, but it's also being encouraged. But when people are growing up or becoming aware with that sort of swirling around in the ether around them, it's entirely natural for young men to think, well, what should we do? So their slogan is tribe and train. Form a tribe and train, because there's going to be war. Well, all sounds very sensible until you really think about it. There's two problems with it. First of all, the training, especially they get once they're in the gym. Initially, it starts with fitness, and then they constantly push two things actually in their very, very slickly produced videos. They're promoting two things at subliminal level almost: huge big muscles and black sun tattoos. So the black sun is right back to the Azov thing and to the Satanism. And if you look at their Telegram channels, 9 out of 10 or even 19 out of 20 of the posts on them are actually, they look thoroughly reasonable. But then you get one, it's the black sun tattoo is showing, or one bit which is a piece about the heroes of Azov or something like that. So you don't spend very long in that without being taken rapidly down a very, very dark road. And the big muscle stuff, you don't get those from working out, you get those from steroids.
Right, that's right.
And steroid use is closely connected with development of homosexuality. And the whole big muscle thing, there's gyms to be fit, but the big muscle stuff, and when these people prance around, as a lot of their photos do, they're all semi-naked. They're all bare-chested and so on and so forth. It's a push dream, this. So yeah, there's grooming going on. There's grooming of these young men going on for homosexuals. And even if there's not homosexuals there at the start, they will certainly jump into this because it's a candy shop for queers.
Yeah, I mean, would women be attracted by? I mean, I'm not saying a big guy doesn't attract girls. Of course, he does. A lot do. I mean, I know a gentleman, absolutely. But as an image or as a style, you'd have to wonder whether that's what healthy women would be necessarily attracted to. And once the male is corrupted into that, it then becomes a self-sustaining. There's no woman to be had, therefore women are bad, therefore.
Well, there's another component to that, though, because in Australia, they've taken the admonition about demographics and breeding rates, and you'll note that a lot of those guys in that neo-Nazi outfit are very young, and they have women. A lot of them look very plain, but they're having children with them, almost as if it's an accoutrement of a lifestyle. That's I think, is that commendable or dangerous?
Well, it's better than not having kids at all. But I haven't, certainly in Britain, I haven't really seen much of that. The only I look very much through their all the Telegram pages connected with the active clubs, and the only reference to women I found at all was leave your girlfriend behind and come to the gym once a week.
Oh, it's a double.
That's the only reference I've seen. So I haven't yet seen anything over here that they're actually trying to find girls for the point of view of having kids. It's solely a male gang thing, and that's it. Now, coming on to the question then of training, it's again, this is weird. They're saying on the one hand it's going to be civil war, and on the other hand they're saying come and get big muscles in the gym. What the hell is connection? There's no big muscle in the world can withstand a knife or a bullet. If people want to train for a civil war, then they can do so legally by going, if they're very young, joining the Army Cadets or by joining the Army Volunteer Reserve. Not doing stuff which is one, useless in a war, and two, whether it's useful or not, the fact they're talking about it puts them directly in breach of the public order laws against paramilitary training. I've got more to say, but Jim, coming on this.
Yeah, I was going to say that when you get that infiltration of that American literature, that silly man Jimmy Mason with his Charlie Manson and Satan and various other things, I actually said to one young bloke who was influenced by any of this, I said, look, there won't be any of these terrorist uprisings and all of this, but from an academic intellectual point of view, if you wanted to learn about terrorism, you can join a university course. There's so many of them. I think they're training agents. I don't know what they're doing, but you can go and join one. I said, yes, it's true. They'll have your name, but you will have read all of the material on this, which you'll 99.9% you'll never use, but you'll know what it is. If the aim is to be some sort of accelerationist revolutionary, and they're using this sort of language around the place, well, you join a gun club, which in Australia are quite legal. You don't need to own a firearm. You can go there and you can learn how to use one. If you wanted to be a person who really wanted to know about explosives, you can get a certificate in explosives. Oh, they'll have your name, but if you read Jimmy Mason that you bought off Martinet Press, you can rest assured they will have your name. So it really makes you wonder. I mean, needless to say, we're having an academic discussion here. We're not suggesting that you buy a gun, get some explosives, and read terrorist manuals.
Yeah.
But the bottom line is, you would learn a lot more if you did that than by reading some of this mad literature that comes out of the USA. But
Absolutely.
these guys are not asked to do that. And the other interesting thing is that I've noticed there's a lot of, you probably had in the UK as well, a lot of this pseudo acceleration, you know, we're going to create change by some sort of dramatic acts and all this sort of business. They actually don't do it. So therefore the material must be some sort of ideological glue that's used to stick all these people together and actually keep them away from the sort of politics that you're talking about that they should engage in, and have the fantasy that one day we will accelerate. Like that idiot.
Absolutely so. Yeah. Now that brings me on to the second point that I wanted to raise in this regard, that they say tribe and train. So we dealt with train. So now think about tribe. So it's tribe, and it's the former community. And a little bit further back towards common sense, there's the nationalist groups which are sympathetic to these people, but not quite as bad. Saying, oh, we do things, we all come together and we're building a community. We come together, so once a year we have a conference, and once a year we have a summer camp, and every couple of months we go out and have a drink together. This is building a community. Now those things are very worthy and worth doing, but it's not building a community. And at the very moment when in Britain, as we were talking about at the start of the show, there's the flag protests, these enormous protests against mass immigration and asylum centres and so on, and especially in Ireland. It's really, really tense and strong stuff. At the very moment when the people actually are waking up and standing on their hind legs and getting up and protesting and sometimes even fighting, at the moment when our people in the broadest sense are beginning to think in terms of us and tribalism and community, these strategic geniuses are coming along and saying, withdraw from the people. There's a lot of contempt, actually. Again, you scratch the surface of the active clubs and so on, there's contempt for the cattle, for the sheep and the going. There's just contempt for the masses. So at the very moment the masses least deserve contempt in the last 50 years, these people are encouraging young, impressionable, young nationalists to have contempt from them and withdraw from them by giving them this tale that you're part of a community if you come along and lift weights and train in the gym. When at this very moment, for instance, the flag protests in Britain, the flags have been up for a couple of months. So some of them are being taken down, some of them are falling down, some of them are getting tatty. This is the very moment at which the communities where they went up purely organically, actually a small group of young nationalists could create a flag team who could go around door to door saying, we're going to be making sure that the flags, when they get tatty, they're taken down. When the time's right, in the spring, they're going to go up again and all the rest of it. And would you like to help us? Would you like to give us a donation, collecting money, names and addresses, and building a local, sorry, it's a committee, but a local committee or team working with the local community to keep this symbol of tribal identity and so on, to keep this thing going, rather than having it fade away because there's no proper leadership. So that's just one example. There's a huge gap there, which a small group of nationalists could step into, and therefore become at the very centre of their community, at the very centre of this tribal identity need the community has. And at that moment, these people are saying, don't go near the people, they're scum, come away and train with us, as you say, in this, for this mythical accelerationist war. It's so wrong-headed that even though the youngsters who are falling for it are decent, you have to believe that the people actually coming up with this wicked nonsense are doing so deliberately to get in the way.
I'd have to agree. It has to be so.
Now, as we move on time-wise, I had a lot of questions prepared, but I don't want to get too bogged down. I want to actually ask you, Nick, you're speaking of falling foul of the wrath of the sensitive defenders of Zion. You have come under legal attack over some postings, and I believe a few years worth of them. That
Yeah, no, it's only over one tweet which I cannot remember, and because my Twitter page was taken down, I can't see it. I don't know. One which I was supposed to have posted in, I think, 2021, which is just a meme. I don't think it breaks the law anyway, regardless of whether I posted it or not, which I genuinely cannot remember. I don't think it breaks the law, but we might have to deal with that because the campaign against anti-Semitism complained to the police at the time when it first came out, and the police looked at it and concluded it's a non-crime hate crime.
Yeah.
It's bizarre hate event, which they've now actually, just as the police have announced this is, even they decided this is so ridiculous they dropped it. But anyway, that was what it was classified as. So no action, and the CAA went and complained.
I thought
sorry, no, that was the police decision was no action. Police and CPS decision was no action. So the CAA complained again and forced the police to investigate under the under the Malicious Communications Act. The police and the CPS investigated it, looked at it, came back and said no action. So the CPS then threw a judicial review at them, which is an enormously expensive thing to defend when your budget is already stretched. And they then came back and with a new complaint several years further down the line under the public order laws, they investigated it again. The police again, the CPS. There's after I was dragged in for an interview and so on, which was a no comment interview, but by which I mean no comment, nothing. Saying no comment, no comment, no comment is actually a bad thing to do. You just say nothing at all. But I gave them a pre-prepared statement, and the CPS looked at it and said, yeah, this defence holds water. There's no realistic prospect of a successful prosecution, so it's being dropped. So then the CAA came back again and bought a private prosecution, which is where I am now. So yeah, I was due in court, strangely enough, in Westminster Crown Court, Westminster Magistrates Court on November the 4th, the same day as Tommy Robinson was there. Yeah. What would be the odds of that? Anyway, it was put back for various reasons, so it's now not due until the 24th of this month, when we will see if this is going to roll on. My defence team are putting in an application for the Crown Prosecution Service to take this over.
Yes, I understand.
And then immediately drop it, which is what they should do, because it didn't pass any of the rules required for this actually to go to court. So we'll see what happens. But obviously, it's very unpleasant for my wife, from the family, and so on. This thing's hanging around yet again, but we'll see where it goes. But the obvious purpose of it is that, and one of the points at which having left it for a year, the CAA suddenly jumped on it yet again, of course, was after Rishi Sunak got up and complained about the fact that Griffin and these Muslims are sitting down and talking together. So we know where it's coming from. We know who's doing it. It won't do them any good in the end, whatever happens. So watch this space.
In the meantime, you've been energetically active on Substack. Prolific, I might add.
Yes.
You've been reading a lot of it, haven't you, Jim?
Yes, I have. Yes, I have. And without giving something away, something you were just talking about, we're actually going to run it. We had a meeting the other day, not successful on one hand, I will say, but very successful on the other, because much of what you said, we came up with for a particular campaign. So inspirational, Nick, inspirational. Yes.
Thank you. So, well, I must fess up to one thing, as you're both saying that I'm prolific on it, that I'm not spending my entire life writing.
Hopefully not, no.
Not least because some of the posts are things which I've written for other things, or just notes which I'd written down and put into files for future use. So I've simply gone and cut and pasted and stuck them in Substack with very, very little effort. Having said which, quite a lot of it is current. I'm using it as the discipline for writing pretty regularly, and not every article, but some of the articles are chapters in future, I believe, very important books. So yeah, thank you for the plug. And anyone watching this, if you don't know what Substack is, just go and find the app. It's free. It's very easy to download, and there's some really good people writing, or for that matter doing videos as well, all sorts of subjects, all sorts of range of people. It appears to be pretty uncensored, and it's intellectually a very, very stimulating and worthwhile thing. I'm on there as Nick Griffin, Beyond the Pale.
I'm on there too. Somebody threw a devil's advocate comment at me today, strangely after reading your latest article, and I should say you're compiling, or you're proposing a compilation of concepts and ideas to feed through the Overton window into the likes of reform, etc. And that's a major project you'll be working on. But he read it and he made the comment at the end, and he said, and he was speaking specifically about Australians, so I'll paraphrase, he said, will it not be easier for subsequent generations just to accept deraciation in the global matrix? So I think he's saying, is it a given that people will fight for, say, their Australian identity or their British identity? We're here. This is something we discuss.
I think it's more than a given. It's absolutely guaranteed. The result of mass immigration and multiculturalism, some people obviously just merge into it, through miscegenation. But amongst the majority of those who don't merge into it, the result of being thrown into a melting pot isn't to disappear, it's to become even more aware than before of your tribe and coalesce around your tribe. And so the future of this isn't a coffee-coloured world. The future of this is Lebanon, Syria, even India, even Russia, actually, where you get different ethnic groups who live cheek by jowl for generations, and they probably support the same national football team if they're into such bread and circuses nonsense. But when it comes to their social life, their marrying and having children and all the rest of it, they stick within their tribe. And that's where, if we can't get rid of them, that's where we have to go. There's no magic wand by which they disappear. They're not going to kill all of us. We're not going to kill all of them. So war is going to get us nowhere. But therefore, the more the nations are disintegrated by what's being done, the more you'll get tribalism.
I agree, absolutely. But I think his meaning is people essentially, I forgot what the coloured pill is. Is it take the red pill or take the blue pill? I think it's take the red pill. But I think he's saying accepting
Leave the blue pills alone. They're not good for your heart.
No, they're not.
I think they're about accepting your status as a consumer, as in the West is asked. So these are, as what Hitler might have described, Babylon of races we have here, feeding a consumerist system. That's another question. Look, now that we're still talking, I might throw it out. Everyone seems to, and even the NSN are doing this now. They try to posit themselves as anti-electionists, and now they're trying to form a party, right? Partly to legitimise their activity, but then with that comes the serious discussion about we'll make changes once we're there. Everyone seems to want to petition the system, but Parliament as a system of representation belongs to the bygone industrial era. It cannot represent the cacophony of today's identities and interests, in which case it has to go. But what replaces it? It's a big question, and it's one that I've been bending my brain over. But I've come to the realisation you cannot have a two-party system when it's trying to, once upon a time, that was your bloody workers and your bosses, essentially, if you wanted to boil that down very simplistically. It certainly was here in this country. But there's not two things. There's multiple identities. There's different communities who, as you said, even here, diasporas eventually want to vote for their Chinese candidate to do things more, or the Indian wants to do this or that. So how is two sides of a parliament going to represent this bubble and squeak and this tumultuous fracturing? It can't. The system is designed for another era.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
So it is indeed a huge question, and we are out of time anyway.
Yeah, we are.
Yeah,
So
I
we're going
know.
to have to come back and discuss that at a later date, I would say. It is a really, really interesting one. But what is absolutely clear is that in all sorts of ways, the things that we've regarded as normal and our generation has regarded as normal and will probably go on forever, no, they're not going to. Everything is up for grabs. Everything is up for change, isn't it?
Yeah, I think it's come to the end of its use-by date, like we've come to the end of our discussion. It's been a good one. It's again, I never feel like I've quite hit the main line, you know. But we've broached everything we wanted to. Well, gentlemen, I will bid you all a good night, and I will. I think we should make some small commemoration to the date we're talking on, which is the 11th of the 11th. Very important acknowledgement. Until we speak again.
Good evening, messieurs.
Good evening.